Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. My name is Lucas Wells. I used to think I was pretty grounded in reality. I worked a quiet job as a structural engineer in Boise, Idaho, lived with my dog Jasper, and spent weekends hiking or camping to decompress from the concrete and spreadsheets. Nothing strange, nothing spiritual, nothing beyond what I could see, measure, or explain. That changed last fall, when I joined a hiking trip up near Granger Ridge. It was supposed to be a reunion of sorts. Me and 3 old college friends, Tyler, Manny, and Ray. We had all drifted over the years, but Tyler got married, had a kid, and wanted one last trip before adulthood pulled him in too deep. He suggested Granger Ridge, a dense patch of mountainous forest not far from the Washington border. Isolated, beautiful, and practically untouched. We met up at a diner on a Friday morning and piled into Manny's beat-up Suburban, full of gear, beer, and easy laughter. The air was crisp, with the bite of early October. None of us had been to Granger Ridge before, but Ray had pulled some maps online and plotted a trail. We parked at an old ranger outpost, just as the sun was tipping above the trees. It was colder than expected. The hike in took most of the day, weaving us through thick pine groves and across cold, shallow creeks. By dusk, we found a clearing near a small glacial lake and pitched camp. That first night, we drank too much, laughed about college idiocy, and swapped exaggerated tales of work and relationships. As the fire burned down, we heard something in the woods, not just a rustle or snap, but a low, heavy step. We all went quiet. Jasper, who rarely barked, stiffened, and growled low. We shone our flashlights, but the light didn't carry far into the dense trees. Tyler joked it was probably a bear. We agreed, nervously. Still, none of us slept well that night. The next morning, we found large prints circling the camp. They were like barefoot human tracks, but longer, wider, deeper. I knelt by one. It had 5 toes, but the stride was too long for a human. The heel was sunken. Something heavy had walked around us in the dark. We debated heading back, but no one wanted to be the one to admit fear. So, we pressed on. As we hiked deeper into the ridge, the woods grew silent. Too silent. No birdsong, no insects. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. We tried to ignore it, but Jasper wouldn't. He whined constantly and wouldn't stray from my side. Around midday, we found something grotesque. A buck, torn in half, intestines splayed like ribbons, yet no tracks around it. No blood trail, no sign of a struggle. Tyler turned pale. Manny refused to take a photo. We moved on, faster now. That night, the noise came back, heavier, closer. A crack echoed through the dark, like a tree being pushed over. We jumped from our tents and gathered around the fire. Jasper barked frantically. Tyler shone his light into the woods and caught 2 glints, eyes reflecting. Tall, too tall. Whatever it was didn't run. It stood there, watching. Manny shouted, and it moved, not like a bear, not on 4 legs, but upright, smooth, deliberate. We could hear its stride. Thump, thump. Branches snapped underfoot, but it never came into full view. We didn't sleep that night. Come dawn, we packed quickly. Tyler said we should cut cross country to make better time back. Ray disagreed, but we followed Tyler anyway. That was our mistake. 2 hours in, we realized we were off course. Ray slipped on a slope and broke his ankle. Badly. We fashioned a splint from pine branches and tried to carry him. Progress was slow, and the thing was still following us. We heard it parallel to our route, always out of sight. Jasper growled constantly now, tail between his legs. It never showed itself, but we knew it was there. We saw the branches move, felt the presence. That night, we built a larger fire, surrounded Ray, and took turns keeping watch. At some point, I dozed off. I woke to Jasper barking and Ray screaming. The fire was scattered. Ray was gone. So was Jasper. We found a drag trail. Blood. Tyler wanted to chase it. I stopped him. I don't know how I did, but I did. We ran. Didn't pack. Didn't stop. We found the trail again, after hours of wandering. At the ranger station, we collapsed. The ranger didn't believe us. He filed a report, but we knew Ray was never coming back. I never saw Jasper again either. I've looked into it since. The Granger Ridge area has stories. Native legends about tall forest men, screams in the night, vanishings. Most people dismiss them, but I saw it. We all did. I no longer hike. I moved out of Boise. I don't sleep well. Sometimes I dream of eyes in the woods, tall shadows watching from behind the trees, and I remember that deep, guttural sound it made. Not a growl, a warning. My name is Aaron Dalton. I grew up in Northern California, near a patch of wilderness called Cedar Hollow. It is the kind of place where stories float like fog through generations. Tales of miners who vanished, lights that dance between trees, and creatures with eyes like glowing coals. I never believed any of it, at least, not until the summer of 2021, when my younger brother Caleb went missing during one of his solo backpacking trips into the Hollow. That week changed everything. Caleb was always more adventurous than me. I am a paramedic, and he worked freelance in wildlife photography. He loved tracking bobcats, bears, even wolves when he could. He said the Hollow held secrets worth chasing, and in June that year, he decided to do a 7-day solo excursion there. He had done it before, though never for that long. He texted me the night before he went in. If I don't make it out, I found something worth dying for. LOL. Talk to you in a week. I thought it was a dumb joke. He never texted back. When the deadline came and went, I filed a missing person report. Search and rescue went out the next morning. I joined them. We found his campsite on the 3rd day. Tent still pitched, stove untouched. Even his DSLR was resting on a rock like he had stepped away mid-shot, but no sign of him. The ranger, a guy named Ellis, said it looked like he had just vanished, like he stood up and never came back. But I found something no one else saw. In the dirt by a fallen log, behind his tent, were prints, large ones, barefoot, human, shaped, but not human. The stride was enormous, the pressure deep. Whatever made them was heavy and walked on 2 legs. Ellis told me quietly that he had seen similar prints in the Hollow before, but he was not allowed to report them. Said the Forestry Service liked to keep things quiet. Told me to drop it, that it would only bring pain. I could not drop it. That night, I went back into the woods alone. I know. It was stupid. I used Caleb's GPS routes and followed the last recorded waypoints on his phone, which the rangers recovered. They led deeper into the Hollow, where the forest thickens into black pine and mossy cliffs. By dusk, I found a trail he had marked with bright orange tags. The trail ended at the base of an overgrown hill with a stone outcrop that looked almost ... arranged. Not natural, like the remains of something older than people. There, I found his last message, etched into bark, scratched with something sharp. It watches, not a bear. Tall, smells like rot. Don't let it follow you. The sun was down before I realized how dark the woods had gotten. That was when the knocking started. Not close at first. Deep, rhythmic knocks, echoing through the trees. Then a whoop, long and low. Not quite animal, not quite human. I froze. Then something moved. Branches cracked. I saw a shape, tall, looming between tree trunks. Not running, just moving with purpose. I ran. I did not look back. I followed the trail, crashing through brush, heart in my throat. My flashlight bounced wildly. I heard it behind me, heavy, steady, never rushed. When I reached the old campsite, it was there, standing just beyond the fire pit, backlit by the moon, 8 feet tall, matted fur, broad chest, long arms that hung lower than they should. Its face was hidden, but the eyes burned gold, and it reeked like dead animals and wet soil. I could not move. Then it did something that still haunts me. It mimicked me. It opened its mouth and said, "My name, Aaron," not quite right. Too slow, like someone trying to speak through broken glass. I turned and ran, screamed the whole way. I did not stop until I reached the ranger station at dawn. They found my story unstable, said I was traumatized, maybe hallucinating, but they did not argue when I showed them the bark Caleb carved, or when I gave them the footage from a camera trap I took from his pack. One blurry frame, a shape, a hand, fingers too long, fur, and behind it, Caleb's backpack. They closed the search a week later. Official cause, presumed animal attack. I know better. I never went back. I moved south, changed jobs. But sometimes I wake up sweating because I still hear it say my name. Still see the gold eyes. Still remember the way it mimicked my voice. And I know it is still out there, in Cedar Hollow, waiting. My name is Damon Ruiz. I do wildlife conservation work in Oregon, mostly around the Cascade Range. People think of this job as serene, but when you're monitoring land that stretches for hundreds of miles, things go wrong more often than you'd expect. It was September 2022, when I was sent out to investigate a series of unusual animal deaths around a small valley near Briar Hollow. Locals had found deer carcasses ripped open, organs gone, flesh torn, but no blood, like something fed, but did not kill cleanly. Rumors had already started. "It's the tall man of the woods," one old hunter told me. "Covered in mud and fur, walks like us, screams like a woman." I thought it was just the usual folklore. Still, I took a week's leave, packed my gear, and went up into the range alone. Briar Hollow is boxed in by steep hills and thick conifers. No cell signal, barely a trail. The first 2 days were quiet. Saw some tracks, mostly cougar or bear. I found one deer carcass, half buried in pine needles. It had been mutilated, ribs snapped. But what caught me off guard was how the area smelled. Not just rot, there was a wet dog musk so thick it made me gag. The third night, I set up a motion camera near the site. I left a piece of raw meat tied to a low branch, hoping to catch whatever was killing the deer. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound I have never forgotten. A scream, high-pitched at first, like a woman in pain. Then it shifted, grew deeper, like something imitating a scream, but not understanding how to shape it. I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and peered out of the tent. Movement. Not close, but tall, between 2 trees, maybe 30 feet away. My light hit eyes. Gold again, reflecting back like a cat's. Then it ducked behind a tree. I didn't sleep. When I checked the camera in the morning, the footage had been corrupted. The meat was gone. The branch it hung from snapped in half. I hiked higher to set another camera, then returned to base camp, but it followed me. I heard it for the first time that afternoon. Low thuds behind me, snapping twigs. When I turned, Nothing. But it always stopped just beyond where I could see. That night, something touched the tent, not a bare swipe. A hand. I could see the outline pressing in, 5 digits, thick as sausage links. One at a time, they dragged across the nylon wall. I didn't breathe. Then it whispered. Damon. Same distorted voice. Like it learned my name from hearing me say it. My blood turned cold. I leaped out with my flare, waving it blindly. The forest was silent. Not even crickets. I should have left then, but I needed proof. Caleb never got closure in Cedar Hollow. I wanted to be braver. I hiked to the second camera the next day. The camera was still there, but the tree it was strapped to had claw marks, deep ones, like a rake had been dragged down the trunk. When I played the footage back in the tent, the image nearly made me vomit. The shape stepped into frame at 2:46 a.m., 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair, long arms, nearly to its knees. The worst part was the face, not like an ape, more like a human that had been stretched too long, eyes sunken but intelligent. It stared at the camera, then walked off. But just before the video cut out, it turned back, and in that digital grain, it smiled. The next night, it attacked. I had just zipped the tent when it came. No scream this time, just silence, until my tent flattened. I rolled out, flare already lit, and saw it above me, looming, breathing heavy, watching. Then it backed away, slowly, like it wanted me to see it walk off. I ran. I didn't pack. I didn't care. I reached my truck by morning, shaking, sleep deprived, out of breath. I turned the footage in to my department. They shelved it, said it was a prank, or bare footage, manipulated with editing. I knew better. I quit the job a week later. I've taken up work as a park interpreter now. Still in nature, but never in the deep forest. I won't go back there, because I know it's real, and it remembers me. Sometimes when I camp too close to the trees, I swear I hear it, the fake scream, the slow whisper of my name, waiting for the moment I stop believing again. My name is Kelsey Tran. I am a wildlife biologist based out of northern Washington, specializing in animal migration and habitat loss. I used to believe science had an explanation for everything, until the winter of 2021, when I tracked something. I wish I had never found it. Started with a phone call from the Pine Ridge Environmental Center. A local volunteer group reported massive footprints crossing a section of protected land just outside the Olympic Forest. At first, I assumed it was misidentified bear tracks or some boot prints distorted by seamelt. Still, I agreed to investigate. The area was remote, no power lines, no road access for miles, just trees, snow, and silence. I arrived with 2 colleagues, Ellis and Jordan, both interns finishing their conservation degrees. We brought gear, trail cams, thermal sensors, and emergency supplies for a 3-day trip. Day 1 was quiet. We found the prints not long after arriving. They were huge, 18 inches long and over 7 inches wide, with clear toe definition. No shoe treads, no claw marks. The stride was long. Too long. Ellis made a joke about Bigfoot. We all laughed. But something about the weight and the snow, how deep the impressions were. We followed the trail. It led us to a thicket of cedar trees, and then stopped, not faded out, just stopped, like something had leaped into the sky. That night, the woods went silent. You do not notice how much ambient sound the forest holds until it disappears. The lack of wind, no rustling branches, no bird calls. It made the dark feel heavier. At 2:30 a.m., Jordan shook me awake. He pointed at the tent wall. Something massive was moving outside. We could hear the crunch of snow, slow and deliberate. It circled the tent twice, then stopped, breathing, right outside. Heavy, rhythmic. Ellis, trying to be brave, whispered that it was probably a moose. But there are no moose in that part of the Olympic range. The shape moved again, closer this time. We held our breath until the sound faded. In the morning we found new prints circling our camp. One came within a foot of the tent, but no drag marks, no handprints, just those massive tracks. We checked the trail cams. One had been pulled from the tree and crushed, no claw marks, just brute force. Day 2, we debated leaving, but Ellis, always the optimist, convinced us to stay. Maybe it's a rogue bear with odd behavior, he said. We agreed to go another mile up the ridge. That afternoon, we found bones, animal remains, cleaned of flesh, not chewed, snapped, piled under a bent pine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Neither could Jordan. Around 3 a.m., I saw something outside the tent through the mesh. It was standing, far enough to not see clearly, close enough to know it was not human, broad shoulders, too tall, and it was staring, not moving, just watching. When I sat up, it turned and melted into the trees. I wanted to believe it was a hallucination, stress, cold, sleep deprivation. But in the morning, the prints were back. They trailed from the tree line to where it stood, and back. We packed, quickly. On the hike out, Ellis fell behind. He said he needed to tie his boot. We waded up the trail. Then we heard it. A scream, not human. A gurgled guttural bellow that vibrated through the trees. We ran back. Ellis was gone. Just gone. We found his boot. And a camera. The strap had snapped. We searched until dusk, then hiked the last 3 miles in near darkness. Rangers called it an animal attack. A cougar, they guessed. I reviewed the footage a week later in a government facility. They let me see it once. It showed Ellis filming himself, talking about the prints. Behind him, between the trees, something moved. Something tall, hair-covered, fast. Then the camera jolted. A grunt, a thud, and then static. They sealed the footage, took my notes, made me sign paperwork. I resigned from the department a month later now. I teach biology at a community college. I do not go into the deep woods anymore, and when I teach, I leave a space in the curriculum for the unexplained, because I know what I saw, and I know it is still out there, walking across the snow, watching from the trees, waiting for someone else to follow its tracks. My name is Kelsey Tran. I am a wildlife biologist based out of northern Washington, specializing in animal migration and habitat loss. I used to believe science had an explanation for everything, until the winter of 2021, when I tracked something I wish I had never found. It started with a phone call from the Pine Ridge Environmental Center. A local volunteer group reported massive footprints crossing a section of protected land just outside the Olympic forest. At first, I assumed it was misidentified bear tracks or some boot prints distorted by smelt. Still, I agreed to investigate. The area was remote, no power lines, no road access for miles, just trees, snow, and silence. I arrived with 2 colleagues, Ellis and Jordan, both interns finishing their conservation degrees. We brought gear, trail cams, thermal sensors, and emergency supplies for a 3-day trip. Day 1 was quiet. We found the prints not long after arriving. They were huge, 18 inches long and over 7 inches wide, with clear toe definition. No shoe treads, no claw marks. The stride was long, too long. Ellis made a joke about Bigfoot. We all laughed. But something about the weight in the snow, how deep the impressions were. We followed the trail. It led us to a thicket of cedar trees and then stopped, not faded out, just stopped, like something had leaped into the sky. That night, the woods went silent. You do not notice how much ambient sound the forest holds until it disappears. The lack of wind, no rustling branches, no bird calls. It made the dark feel heavier. At 2:30 a.m., Jordan shook me awake. He pointed at the tent wall. Something massive was moving outside. We could hear the crunch of snow, slow and deliberate. It circled the tent twice, then stopped, breathing, right outside, heavy, rhythmic. Ellis, trying to be brave, whispered that it was probably a moose. But there are no moose in that part of the Olympic range. The shape moved again, closer this time. We held our breath until the sound faded. In the morning we found new prints circling our camp. One came within a foot of the tent, but no drag marks, no handprints, just those massive tracks. We checked the trail cams. One had been pulled from the tree and crushed, no claw marks, just brute force. Day 2, we debated leaving, but Ellis, always the optimist, convinced us to stay. Maybe it's a rogue bear with odd behavior, he said. We agreed to go another mile up the ridge. That afternoon, we found bones, animal remains, cleaned of flesh, not chewed, snapped, piled under a bent pine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Neither could Jordan. Around 3 a.m., I saw something outside the tent through the mesh. It was standing, far enough to not see clearly, close enough to know it was not human, broad shoulders, too tall, and it was staring, not moving, just watching. When I sat up, it turned and melted into the trees. I wanted to believe it was a hallucination, stress, cold, sleep deprivation. But in the morning, the prints were back. They trailed from the tree line to where it stood, and back. We packed, quickly. On the hike out, Ellis fell behind. He said he needed to tie his boot. We waded up the trail, then we heard it. A scream, not human. A gurgled, guttural bellow that vibrated through the trees. We ran back. Ellis was gone, just gone. We found his boot and a camera. The strap had snapped. We searched until dusk, then hiked the last 3 miles in near darkness. Rangers called it an animal attack. A cougar, they guessed. I reviewed the footage a week later in a government facility. They let me see it once. It showed Ellis filming himself, talking about the prints. Behind him, between the trees, something moved. Something tall, hair covered, fast. Then the camera jolted. A grunt, a thud, and then static. They sealed the footage, took my notes, made me sign paperwork. I resigned from the department a month later. Now, I teach biology at a community college. I do not go into the deep woods anymore, and when I teach, I leave a space in the curriculum for the unexplained, because I know what I saw, and I know it is still out there, walking across the snow, watching from the trees, waiting for someone else to follow its tracks. The first time I saw the footprints, I told myself they were a bear's. Too big, too deep, the stride too long. But what else could they be? I was a wildlife researcher, after all, a man of science. I wasn't supposed to believe in monsters. That was before the screaming started. The Pacific Northwest rainforest had a way of playing tricks on the mind. The trees stood too close, their branches knitting together into a ceiling that choked out the sky. The air stayed damp, thick with the scent of rotting leaves and something else. Something musky, like wet dog and old blood. I was there to track wolf populations. Simple work, really. Set up cameras, collect scat samples, document territory markings. But on the 3rd day, I found something my textbooks never prepared me for. A set of handprints pressed into the mud near Cedar Creek. Humanoid, but not human. The fingers were too long, the palms too wide, and pressed so deep into the earth that whatever made them had to weigh over 800 pounds. My skin prickled. I told myself it was the cold. Then I noticed the broken branches. 12 feet up the nearest cedar. Something had climbed there, something massive. The first night I heard it, I thought it was the wind, a low shuddering groan that rolled through the trees like distant thunder, but the air was still, dead still. Then it came again, closer this time. A sound that wasn't quite animal, wasn't quite human, a vibration that made my ribs ache. I sat frozen in my tent, gripping my hunting knife, listening as something circled my campsite. Slow, deliberate footsteps, the snap of twigs under impossible weight. When dawn came, I found the prints. They went right up to the tent flap, stopped, then turned away. By the second week, I stopped sleeping. The cameras kept catching shadows, hulking, bipedal shapes that moved too fast for their size, always just out of focus. The audio recorders picked up whistles in the dead of night. Not bird calls. Not any animal I knew. Then came the gifts. A dead rabbit, left by my fire pit. Its neck snapped clean. A perfect circle of stones stacked near my tent. And once, worst of all, a crude doll made of twisted branches and moss, propped against a tree, where I'd be sure to see it. Its face was made of bark. It was smiling. The final night, the forest went silent. No insects, no owls, just the creak of trees, swaying under something's weight. I saw it then, between the firs, 8 feet tall, if it was an inch, shoulders like boulders, covered in matted black hair that gleamed in the moonlight. It didn't move like an animal. It moved like a man, a hungry man. Our eyes met. Its were yellow and intelligent. They found my camera a month later, half buried in the mud. The last photo shows nothing but trees, but the audio file. That's the worst part. You can hear me screaming, you can hear the wet crunch of bones, and underneath it all, that same low, shuddering groan. Only this time, it's laughing. The cave system beneath Black Ridge Mountain had been sealed since 1983, when 3 members of the Appalachian Speleological Society vanished during a routine survey. The official report blamed flash flooding. The families blamed the mountain. The Park Service welded steel gates over the entrance and listed the entire area as prohibited. I shouldn't have been there, but when you're 24 years old, drowning in student debt, and desperate for your big break in geological research, rules start to feel flexible, especially when your advisor casually mentions that whoever maps the Black Ridge Caverns could probably name them. The Holloway Caverns, it had a nice ring to it. I waited until late September, when the park rangers shifted to seasonal staffing. The old access road was overgrown, but passable if you didn't mind scraping the undercarriage of your Jeep. I parked a mile from the site and hiked the rest. My pack heavy with climbing gear, spare batteries, and enough ration bars to last 3 days. The cave mouth looked like a wound in the mountainside, a jagged fissure half hidden by rhododendron bushes, the rusted remains of the Park Service gate dangling from one hinge. Someone had cut through the chain. Recently, the air that whispered out was unnaturally cold. It carried a scent I couldn't place. Not the damp mineral smell of most caves, but something sharper, like wet charcoal and spoiled meat. I checked my headlamp, adjusted my harness, took the first photo for my records. Then I stepped inside. The initial descent was textbook karst, topography, narrow limestone passages, stalactites, dripping mineral, rich water, the occasional skitter of bats fleeing deeper into the dark. I marked my route with fluorescent tape every 50 feet. pausing to take samples where the rock formations looked unusual. The first anomaly appeared 2 hours in. The floor changed from rough stone to something smoother, almost polished. My boots slipped as I knelt to examine it. The surface wasn't natural erosion, it was worn smooth, like marble steps in an ancient cathedral, and it was covered in scratches, not tool marks. Claw marks, deep, parallel grooves that ran the length of the passage. Some were fresh enough to gleam in my headlamp's beam. I should have turned back. Instead, I took out my camera. The tunnel opened into a cavern the size of a football field. My light barely reached the ceiling, where strange formations hung like melted wax. The air here was colder still, my breath pluming invisible clouds, despite the 60-degree weather outside. That's when I saw the nests, not animal dens. These were deliberate constructions. Dozens of them, arranged in concentric circles around a central depression in the cavern floor. Each was made from woven branches, animal bones, and strips of what looked like fabric. I moved closer. The nearest nest contained a tattered flannel shirt. The next held a hiking boot, the laces neatly coiled beside it. The third cradled a human jawbone, the teeth filed 2 points. My hands shook as I photographed them. Then my headlamp flickered. Something moved in the shadows between nests. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, listening to the soft click, click, click of claws on stone. The sound came from multiple directions now, echoing off the cavern walls. When my light steadied, I saw them. Not bears, not any animal on record. Bipedal, but hunched, their elongated arms brushing the ground as they moved. Hairless skin stretched tight over distended rib cages. Their faces, God, their faces. No eyes, just smooth skin where features should be, split vertically by mouths too wide for any human skull. The closest one tilted its head. A wet, clicking sound bubbled from its throat. Then, impossibly, it spoke. More, it rasped, in a voice that wasn't quite human. More come. The others took up the chant. More, more, more. I ran. The creatures didn't chase. They herded, clicking to each other in the dark, cutting off escape routes, driving me deeper into the cave system. My last fluorescent marker led to a dead end. That's where I found the pit. A yawning sinkhole at least 30 feet across. Its edges worn smooth by generations of passing bodies. The stench rising from it made my eyes water, and the walls were moving. Not with creatures, with people. Dozens of them, embedded in the limestone like insects in amber. Some still twitched. One man's mouth opened in a silent scream as the rock slowly swallowed him whole. The clicking grew louder behind me. Something cold and clawed closed around my ankle. Final recording recovered from Holloway's GoPro. Timestamp, 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds heavy. Breathing. They're not eating us. They're preserving us. The cave, it's alive. It hungers, and they feed it. Wet clicking sounds approach. Oh God. Screams. Camera impacts ground. Shows view of cavern ceiling. Whispered the rocks. The rocks are moving. Recording ends. The first time I saw the figure standing at the tree line, I thought it was a hunter. It was late October in the Adirondacks, the kind of golden autumn afternoon that makes you forget winter is coming. I was stacking firewood behind my uncle's cabin when movement caught my eye. A tall, dark shape, standing perfectly still between the birches, about 50 yards into the woods. Even from that distance, I could tell something was wrong. The proportions were off. Shoulders too wide, arms too long. It stood slightly hunched, like its spine couldn't quite support the weight of its upper body. And the way the sunlight hit it, there were no highlights, no texture, just solid black. I waved it, didn't wave back. When I blinked, it was gone. That night, the dream started. Vivid nightmares of being chased through endless woods by something that moved like a man but didn't breathe like one. I'd wake gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, convinced I'd heard scratching at the cabin door. The third morning, I found footprints in the frost outside my window. Bare feet. Too large. The stride measured nearly 5 feet between steps. The game cameras told the real story. I'd set up 6 around the property after the first sighting. What they captured made my blood run cold. 3:17 a.m. A shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing, facing the cabin. 3:29 a.m. Closer now, just beyond the firewood pile. 3:33 a.m. Right outside my bedroom window, its elongated fingers pressed against the glass. The timestamp on the last photo was wrong, though it showed 3:33 a.m., but when I checked my phone, the actual time was 3:17. The local librarian recognized my description immediately. "Ah," she said, sliding a yellowed newspaper across the counter. "You've met the walker." The 1987 article told of a missing hiker who'd vanished near my uncle's land. Search teams found his journal a week later. The final entry read, "It stands outside my tent every night. I think it's learning my face." Below the article was a photo of the search party, and there, just visible between 2 trees in the background, stood a tall, dark figure, watching last night. I finally saw it up close. I'd set a trap, motion lights, cameras, even borrowed a thermal scope from a hunting friend. Nothing prepared me for the reality. It didn't show up on thermal, the motion lights didn't trigger. But when I looked through the regular night vision camera, there it was, standing in my living room. Head cocked, smiling. With my own face. They'll find this journal eventually. Maybe you're reading it now. If so, do me one favor, check your windows, then check them again, because the walker doesn't just take people. It becomes them, and I think, I think it's almost finished with me. The first rule of winter caretaking at the Glacier Peak Observatory: when the radio stops working, you stay inside. I learned why the hard way. They hired me because I was desperate. 6 months alone, maintaining a remote weather station in the Alaskan interior paid enough to wipe out my medical debt. The brochure didn't mention the previous caretaker's disappearance, or the way the supply pilot's hands shook when he dropped me off. "Storm's coming," he'd said, eyes darting to the tree line. "You hear anything? Unusual? You wait it out? Understand? IDIDN single quotes." Not until day 47. The silence came first. One moment, the usual chorus of wind through spruce trees. The next, absolute stillness. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums until they ache. Then the radio died. Not static, not interference. Just dead air, like someone had unplugged it from the universe. That's when the knocking started. 3 precise impacts against the observatory's north wall. Exactly 6 seconds apart. Every time I told myself it was ice cracking. Then I saw the footprints. They appeared overnight in fresh powder. A single trail circling the building, humanoid, but stretched too long. The stride nearly 5 feet between steps. No return tracks. Whatever made them had come from the woods, but it never left. Day 52, the temperature dropped to 40. The pipes froze. The generator failed, and the knocking moved inside. I traced it to the crawlspace access panel. The lock was rusted shut from the outside. From the inside, fresh scratches gleamed in my flashlight beam. Something breathed down there, something warm. The final journal entry from the last caretaker played on a loop in my head. It learns fast. Yesterday, it knocked. Today, it whispers. Tomorrow, the page ended there. Tonight, through the floor vents. I heard my mother's voice for the first time in 10 years. She's been dead since I was 16. Whatever's under the house doesn't know that, or it doesn't care. They'll find this recorder when the thaw comes. If you're listening, don't trust the silence. Don't answer the knocking, and whatever you do, don't let it learn your voice. The highway patrol had abandoned this stretch of Route 17 after the third disappearance in as many months. The asphalt was cracked and buckled, weeds pushing through like skeletal fingers, grasping for sunlight. Mile markers leaned at drunken angles, their reflective surfaces dulled by time and neglect. I knew I shouldn't have stopped, but when you see a child standing alone on the shoulder at midnight, you stop. You always stop. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her yellow sundress soaked through and clinging to her thin frame. She stood perfectly still beneath the overpass, her bare feet submerged in a puddle that shimmered with an unnatural darkness. My headlights painted her in stark relief against the concrete supports, casting long shadows that didn't quite match her movements. I rolled down the window. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew something was wrong. The air was too still. No crickets. No distant hum of tires on pavement. Just the steady drip of water from the overpass and the idle rumble of my truck's engine. She didn't respond. Didn't even turn her head. Just kept staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see. I put the truck in park and reached for the door handle. That's when I noticed the puddle. It was too large, too perfectly circular. And the surface, it wasn't reflecting the overpass or my headlights. Instead, it showed a night sky filled with stars that weren't visible through the storm clouds overhead. The CB radio crackled to life. "Help me, mister." The voice was small, frightened. A child's voice. But it didn't come through the speakers. It came from right behind me, whispering directly into my ear. I spun around so fast I nearly threw out my back. The cab was empty. When I looked back at the overpass, the girl was gone. The puddle began to bubble. At first it was just small ripples at the edges. Then the center bulged upward, the surface tension stretching like a latex glove filling with water. My hands clenched around the steering wheel as something pale and glistening broke through. Long, skeletal fingers with too many joints, pressing downward, as if the puddle's surface was a membrane being peeled back from beneath. I slammed the gear shift into drive and stomped on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching. In my rearview mirror, I saw the fingers withdraw, the puddle settling back into its unnatural stillness. That was 3 hours ago. Now my headlights keep flickering out at random intervals, plunging me into darkness for just long enough to make my heart stop. The fuel gauge hasn't budged from half a tank despite the miles rolling by. And every time I check the mirror, my reflection is just a little wrong, the smile a touch too wide, the eyes a shade too dark. The CB crackles every few minutes now, that same child's voice growing louder, more insistent. "Almost there, mister. I don't know where there is, but the exit signs keep counting down. 10 miles, 5 miles, 2 miles. To a turnoff that wasn't on any of my maps, and in the back of my mind, a terrible thought takes root. What if I'm not being chased? What if I'm being herded? The real estate agent didn't mention why the previous owner sold the house after only 3 months. I found out the first night. It started with the scratching. Not the pitter-patter of mice in the walls, but something heavier. Something that moved with purpose. I'd lie awake listening to it, travel through the house, up the stairs, down the hallway, pausing outside my bedroom door like a guest working up the courage to knock. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner, just snippets of conversation that cut off the moment I focused on them. But as the weeks passed, they grew louder, more distinct. "You shouldn't have bought this house," a woman's voice murmured from the heating vent one night. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice that answered wasn't human. It was wet and clicking, like someone speaking around a mouthful of broken teeth. Too late now. The basement door was locked when I moved in. Not just locked, sealed. 3 deadbolts and a heavy chain, all installed from the outside. The key the realtor gave me didn't fit any of them. "It's just an old root cellar," she'd said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing down there but dust and spiderwebs." I believed her until the night I heard something knocking from the other side. Not random banging, a pattern. 3 slow knocks, too fast. Then silence, waiting. The previous owners left in a hurry. I found their belongings, still packed in boxes in the attic. Photo albums, winter coats, a child's stuffed bear with one button I'm missing. Beneath it all was a leather-bound journal. The last entry was dated the day they moved out. "The house is hungry again. It started taking pieces of us while we sleep." Sarah woke up missing a finger. I found it in the flower jar. "The house puts them back wrong. The fingers it gave her aren't hers. They're someone else's." The page ended there. On the back cover, scrawled in what looked like charcoal, "Don't open the basement. Don't feed it. Don't let it learn your name." Last night, the scratching stopped. The house was eerily silent for the first time since I moved in. I almost relaxed. Then the basement door creaked open on its own. The smell hit me first, damp earth and rotting meat. Then came the sound, breathing. Wet, labored breathing from the darkness below, and something else. The click, click, click of too many joints moving at once. I'm writing this from my car. The house looms in the rearview mirror. Every window dark, except one. The basement light is on, and something is standing in it, waving. The drill team vanished on day 17. We found their camp exactly as they'd left it. Coffee still steaming in insulated mugs, notebooks open to sketches of the ice core samples. Only the radios were dead, all 6 of them filled with the same black, viscous fluid that oozed from the borehole. Dr. Chen was the first to say what we were all thinking. They didn't leave. They were taken. I should have listened when she demanded we evacuate. The Antarctic Research Station was built atop 3 miles of glacial ice. Our team of 12 geologists and engineers were there to study ancient climate, patterns in the ice cores, routine work, boring even, until we drilled past the frost line. The ice down there wasn't supposed to be hollow, yet our cameras showed vast, winding tunnels stretching into darkness. The walls were smooth as glass, carved with strange spiral patterns that made your eyes hurt if you stared too long, and the temperature readings made no sense, while the surface hovered at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The tunnels registered a steady 32 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly, at freezing, as if something wanted the ice to stay, just solid enough to maintain the tunnels. The first casualty was Ramirez. He'd been monitoring the drill site overnight. When we found him at dawn, he was kneeling before the borehole, shirtless despite the cold, his arms plunged elbow deep into the black fluid now bubbling up from below. His skin had turned translucent. I could see his veins pulsing blue beneath the ice-white flesh. His lips moved constantly, whispering numbers in a language none of us recognized. When we tried to pull him back, his arms came off at the shoulders with a sound like snapping icicles. No blood, just clear viscous fluid that smelled like ozone and rotting seaweed. Day 23. The power failed. Not just the generators, our flashlights, radios, even battery-powered equipment all died at once. Only the emergency glow sticks worked, casting an eerie green light through the station corridors. That's when we heard the tapping dot. At first it came through the walls, then the vents. Finally, the toilets, a rhythmic knocking from deep in the plumbing, like something was climbing up through the pipes. Dr. Chen grabbed my arm, her breath fogging in the freezing air. "It's learned the layout," she whispered. "It's been mapping us this whole time. I'm the last one. The others are gone, not dead, just changed. I see them sometimes through the ice, moving effortlessly through the tunnels. Their bodies warped and elongated to fit the narrow passages. They don't need heat anymore, don't need light. They just drift through the frozen darkness, whispering numbers to something even deeper below. The drill still runs day and night though. No human hand operates it. And the ice, ... the ice is learning." The Forest Service issued us new radios last week. Sleek digital models with emergency beacons, GPS tracking, and all the latest safety features. What they didn't mention was the static. It begins precisely at 3:17 a.m. every night, without fail. Not the usual white noise or distant chatter you'd expect from radio interference, but something far more unsettling, a wet, crackling hiss that bleeds through every channel, regardless of frequency. At first I dismissed it as atmospheric anomalies bouncing off the old fire lookout towers dotting the preserve. Then I had the idea to record it and play the audio back at quarter speed. The discovery turned my blood to ice. There were distinct words buried in that noise. Look up 3 simple syllables that have cost me every night's sleep since. They found another hiker yesterday morning, same as the others. No visible trauma, no signs of animal predation, just curled into a tight fetal position inside the hollow of a lightning blasted, ponderosa pine. His skin had fused with the bark in intricate whorled patterns, as if the tree had grown around him rather than the other way around. The sheriff wrote it off as exposure. The coroner didn't even wait for the autopsy before marking cardiac arrest on the death certificate. But I saw what they refused to acknowledge. The man's hands told the real story. His fingernails weren't just missing, they'd been worn down. 2 bloody, ragged crescents, the nail beds packed with forest detritus, dirt, pine needles, flakes of bark, as if he'd spent his final hours clawing desperately at something ... or trying to dig his way out. When I showed the photos to the park superintendent, he made me take down all the missing persons flyers. Bad for tourism, he said, not meeting my eyes. The static is evolving. Now it bleeds through, even when the radios are powered off. Last night I awoke to find my unit humming ominously in its charging dock, the display flashing nitrogen monoxide signal in pulsing crimson letters, while that same liquid whisper oozed from the speaker, "You're being watched." I threw the damn thing against the wall hard enough to crack the casing. This morning, I found it back on the charging dock, pristine, undamaged, battery at 100%, despite the entire station losing power for 6 hours. The trees are wrong. I first noticed it near Fire Tower 7. The way the lodgepole pines stand just a fraction too straight. Their branches angled with geometric precision that defies natural growth patterns. They don't sway in the wind so much as ... lean, like spectators craning their necks for a better view. Yesterday, I conducted an experiment. I carved a small X into the bark of a particularly suspicious pine, then returned at dusk. The mark was 3 feet higher than I'd left it. Final log entry recovered from Ranger Station 7, dictated via emergency recorder. They told me this forest was ancient. They never told me it was hungry. The trees are moving closer tonight. Not the slow creep of growing things, but purposeful, jerking motions that make my stomach lurch. Through the rain, streaked windows, I watch them contort. Trunks twisting in ways cellulose fibers shouldn't allow. Roots pulling free of the earth with wet, sucking sounds that carry through the walls. The radio died completely an hour ago. Not just static, total electronic silence. Yet I don't need it anymore to hear the message. Because now the words come from everywhere at once. From the groaning floorboards, beneath my boots. From the whispering vents overhead. From the very walls themselves. Vibrating with inhuman vocalizations. The last thing I'll ever see is the station door bulging inward as something old and wooden and terribly patient finally comes calling. The house stood empty for 11 years after the last family disappeared. I should have wondered why the bank sold it to me for cash, no questions asked. Why the neighbors' faces went pale when I mentioned the address. Why the basement door had 5 deadbolts, all installed from the inside. But the price was right, and I was desperate. The first night, I heard something breathing through the vents. The scratching started in the walls, not rats. Something bigger. Something that moved in straight lines from room to room, pausing at electrical outlets like it was listening through them. I found the first nest behind the water heater, woven from dental floss and hair. Not pet hair, human. The strands were arranged in perfect concentric circles, each tied with elaborate knots that looked almost ritualistic. The realtor's business card was tucked in the center. Her phone number had been crossed out in its place. Someone had written, "Too late to call now." The previous owners left journals, not hidden, placed neatly on the coffee table like they wanted them found. The last entry chilled me. The house doesn't just take people, it remakes them. We found Mom in the attic this morning, or something wearing her face. Its skin moves wrong, like there's too much of it. The page ended there. On the back, in a child's handwriting, it's learning how to smile. The basement door was open this morning. Not broken, unlocked. All 5 deadbolts drawn back like someone had been waiting for me to leave first. The stairs descended into perfect blackness. Not shadow, not darkness. An absence of light, so total it hurt to look at. Something moved down there. Not a shape. A distortion, like watching oil swirl in water. If the oil had teeth, they'll find this journal when they tear the house down. Don't. It's not empty anymore. The thing in the basement learned how to wear faces last week. Now it's learning how to speak. And oh God, it's using my voice. The drill team vanished on day 17. We found their camp exactly as they'd left it. Coffee still steaming in insulated mugs. Notebooks open to sketches of the ice core samples. Only the radios were dead, all 6 of them filled with the same black, viscous fluid that oozed from the borehole. Dr. Chen was the first to say what we were all thinking. They didn't leave. They were taken. I should have listened when she demanded we evacuate. The Antarctic Research Station was built atop 3 miles of glacial ice. Our team of 12 geologists and engineers were there to study ancient climates, patterns in the ice cores, routine work, boring even, until we drilled past the frost line. The ice down there wasn't supposed to be hollow, yet our cameras showed vast winding tunnels stretching into darkness. The walls were smooth as glass, carved with strange spiral patterns that made your eyes hurt if you stared too long, and the temperature readings made no sense, while the surface hovered at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The tunnels registered a steady 32 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly at freezing, as if something wanted the ice to stay. just solid enough to maintain the tunnels. The first casualty was Ramirez. He'd been monitoring the drill site overnight. When we found him at dawn, he was kneeling before the borehole, shirtless despite the cold, his arms plunged elbow deep into the black fluid now bubbling up from below. His skin had turned translucent. I could see his veins pulsing blue beneath the ice, white flesh. His lips moved constantly, whispering numbers in a language none of us recognized. When we tried to pull him back, his arms came off at the shoulders with a sound like snapping icicles. No blood, just clear, viscous fluid that smelled like ozone and rotting seaweed. Day 23. The power failed. Not just the generators, our flashlights, radios, even battery-powered equipment all died at once. Only the emergency glow sticks worked, casting an eerie green light through the station corridors. That's when we heard the tapping dot. At first it came through the walls, then the vents. Finally, the toilets, a rhythmic knocking from deep in the plumbing, like something was climbing up through the pipes. Dr. Chen grabbed my arm, her breath fogging in the freezing air. "It's learned the layout," she whispered. "It's been mapping us this whole time. I'm the last one. The others are gone. Not dead, just changed. I see them sometimes through the ice, moving effortlessly through the tunnels. Their bodies warped and elongated to fit the narrow passages. They don't need heat anymore, don't need light. They just drift through the frozen darkness, whispering numbers to something even deeper below. The drill still runs day and night though. No human hand operates it. And the ice, ... The ice is learning." The first dead whale washed ashore on a Tuesday morning, its massive body beached on the black sands of Hollow's Cove like some ancient shipwreck. By Friday, 7 more had followed, their rotting carcasses forming a grim dotted line along 3 miles of coastline. Each bore the same impossible wound, a perfect circular bite nearly 6 feet across, the edges so smooth they might have been made by some monstrous cookie cutter. I knelt beside the freshest carcass, the stench of blubber and brine thick in my throat. My fingers trembled as I traced the wound's inner edge. Not ragged like a shark attack, not shattered like a ship's propeller. These edges were surgically precise, the underlying ribs polished clean as if sanded by some meticulous craftsman, and running along the inner curve, nearly invisible unless you knew to look, were faint spiral patterns. Like the grooves of a massive screw, the old Portuguese fishermen crossed themselves when they saw it. "O velho está com fome," they whispered. The old one is hungry. As lead marine biologist for the Coastal Research Institute, I should have dismissed their superstitions, but when the lab results came back, even my most skeptical colleagues fell silent. The tissue samples showed traces of an unknown enzyme, something that dissolved collagen and fat while leaving bone untouched, and the sonar scans of the nearby trench revealed disturbing anomalies. Shapes too large to be whales, moving in patterns no marine creature should follow. That night, alone in my clifftop research station, I heard the first knock at my door. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the empty building. When I checked the security feed, the porch was empty. Just wind, whipped rain, and the distant glow of the lighthouse. Then the camera flickered, and for one heart-stopping second, I saw them. Footprints appearing in the wet sand, leading to my door. Not animal tracks, not human either. Just deep, circular depressions, spaced 5 feet apart. As if something massive had balanced on a single pointed leg. The second knock came from inside the house, from the basement door I always kept locked. Now, I sit here in the glow of my computer screen, listening to the wet, clicking sounds rising from the vents. The fisheries department has stopped returning my calls. The university revoked my credentials after I showed them the footage from last night's dive. The thing I caught moving through the black water with impossible grace. Its body a nightmare of spiraling flesh, and that single, unblinking eye, the size of a dinner plate. They think I've lost my mind. Maybe I have, because the knocking has started again, and this time, it's using my dead research partner's voice. The first time I saw the figure at the tree line, I told myself it was just a hunter. It was late October in the Adirondacks, the kind of crisp autumn afternoon that makes the whole forest glow gold. I was stacking firewood behind my uncle's hunting cabin when movement caught my eye. A tall, dark shape standing perfectly still between the birch trees about 50 yards into the woods. Even from that distance, I could tell something was off. The proportions were all wrong. Shoulders too broad, arms too long, hanging nearly to its knees. It stood slightly hunched, like its spine couldn't quite support the weight of its upper body. And the way the sunlight hit it, there were no highlights, no texture. Just solid black, absorbing the light like a hole cut in reality. I raised a hand in greeting. It didn't respond. When I blinked, it was gone. That night, the nightmares started, vivid, dreams of being chased through endless woods by something that moved like a man but didn't breathe like one. I'd wake gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, certain I'd heard scratching at the cabin door. The third morning, I found footprints in the frost outside my bedroom window, bare human feet, but far too large, at least 18 inches long, the stride measured. Nearly 5 feet between steps. I set up game cameras around the property. What they captured made my blood run cold. 3:17 a.m., a shadowy figure standing at the tree line, facing the cabin. 3:29 a.m., closer now, just beyond the woodpile. 3:33 a.m., right outside my window, elongated fingers pressed against the glass. The time stamp on the last photo was wrong. It showed 3:33 a.m., but when I checked my phone, the actual time was 3:17. The local librarian recognized my description immediately. "Ah," she said, sliding a yellowed newspaper across the counter. "You've met the walker." The 1987 article told of a missing hiker who'd vanished near my uncle's land. Search teams found his journal a week later. The final entry read, "It stands outside my tent every night. I think it's learning my face." Below the article was a photo of the search party, and there, barely visible, between 2 trees in the background, stood a tall, dark figure, watching last night. I saw it up close. I'd rigged the cabin with motion lights, cameras, even borrowed a thermal scope from a hunting buddy. Nothing prepared me for the reality. It didn't register on thermal. The motion lights didn't trigger. But when I looked through the night vision camera, there it was, standing in my living room, head cocked, smiling with my own face. They'll find this journal eventually. Maybe you're reading it now. If so, do me one favor, check your windows tonight, then check them again, because the walker doesn't just take people, it becomes them, and I think, I think it's almost finished with me. The house on Briarwood Lane stood empty for 11 years after the last family disappeared. I should have questioned why the bank sold it to me for cash with no background check. I should have wondered why the neighbors crossed the street rather than walk past the property. I definitely should have asked why the basement door had 5 deadbolts, all installed from the inside. But the price was right, and after the divorce, I was desperate enough to ignore the warning signs. The first night, I heard something breathing through the vents, not the steady rhythm of the furnace. Something wetter, more deliberate, like it was tasting the air, sampling my scent as I moved from room to room. I told myself it was just the house settling, old pipes groaning. I was wrong. By the third day, I noticed the scratching, not the pitter-patter of mice in the walls. This was something heavier, something that moved with purpose. I'd lie awake listening to it, travel through the house, up the stairs, down the hallway, pausing outside my bedroom door like a guest working up the courage to knock. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator, just snippets of conversation that cut off the moment I focused on them. But as the weeks passed, they grew louder, more distinct. "You shouldn't have bought this house," a woman's voice murmured from the heating vent one night. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice that answered wasn't human. It was wet and clicking, like someone speaking around a mouthful of broken teeth. Too late now. The basement door was locked when I moved in. Not just locked, sealed. 3 deadbolts and a heavy chain, all installed from the outside. The key the realtor gave me didn't fit any of them. "It's just an old root cellar," she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing down there but dust and spiderwebs." I believed her until the night I heard something knocking from the other side. Not random banging, a pattern. 3 slow knocks, too fast, then silence, waiting. The previous owners left in a hurry. I found their belongings still packed in boxes in the attic. Photo albums, winter coats, a child's stuffed bear with one button eye missing. Beneath it all was a leather-bound journal. The last entry was dated the day they moved out. "The house is hungry again. It started taking pieces of us while we sleep." Sarah woke up missing a finger. I found it in the flower jar. The house puts them back wrong. The fingers it gave her aren't hers. There's someone else's. The page ended there. On the back cover, scrawled in what looked like charcoal, "Don't open the basement. Don't feed it. Don't let it learn your name." Last night, the scratching stopped. The house was eerily silent for the first time since I moved in. I almost relaxed. Then the basement door creaked open on its own. The smell hit me first, damp earth and rotting meat. Then came the sound, breathing, wet, labored breathing from the darkness below, and something else. The click, click, click of too many joints moving at once. I'm writing this from my car. The house looms in the rearview mirror. Every window dark except one. The basement light is on, and something is standing in it, waving with my face. The first thing I noticed when I took the seasonal ranger position at Black Spruce National Forest was how the trees grew too close together. Their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers, forming a canopy so thick it choked out the sky. The Forest Service manual said this was normal for old growth woodland. The manual lied. They found the first missing hiker today. Not lost, not injured, just ... gone. His tent stood perfectly intact, sleeping bag neatly rolled, flashlight still working. Only his boots remained, placed side by side at the tent's entrance, like he'd stepped out barefoot and vanished into thin air. The sheriff called it an animal attack, but I saw the way his deputies avoided looking at the trees, how their hands trembled when they bagged the evidence, and I definitely noticed the scratches on the tent's interior. Not claw marks, fingernail grooves, as if someone had tried desperately to claw their way out from inside. The forest has started singing. It begins at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night. A low shuddering hum that vibrates through the ground and up into my cot. The sound isn't natural, doesn't follow any animal call I've studied. Last night I recorded it. When I played the audio back at quarter speed, the vibrations resolved into words. "We remember your bones." I burned the recording. This morning I found the ashes rearranged into perfect spiral patterns on my desk. The trees are moving, not the wind, not growth. I proved it yesterday by carving small X's into 5 different trunks at eye level. This morning, the marks were all 6 inches higher. Tonight, I watched through binoculars as a massive pine twisted its trunk slowly clockwise, its branches curling like fingers around a nearby sapling. When I shone my flashlight, the bark split vertically, just for an instant, revealing something wet and glistening beneath. The Forest Service radios stopped working today. Now the only transmissions come through on dead air. You shouldn't have marked us. They're inside the station, not the trees themselves. What lives inside them? I first saw one clearly tonight, tall and emaciated, its bark, like skin splitting vertically, to reveal pulsating wetness beneath. It moved with terrible grace between the pines, its elongated fingers brushing each trunk in passing, where it touched. The wood groaned and reshaped itself. The emergency generator just died, from the crawlspace beneath the floorboards. I hear something scratching, not trying to get in, trying to get out. They told me this forest was ancient. They never told me it was hungry. The trees press closer every night, their trunks bending at impossible angles as they slowly surround the station. The radio died hours ago, but I don't need it anymore to hear the message. The words come through the walls now, vibrating in the wood grain. We remember. We wait. We take. I'm the last ranger left. When they find this logbook, tell my family I didn't scream, even when the roots broke through the floor, even when the bark began growing over my skin, even when the forest showed me what really lives inside these ancient, hollow trunks. The house on Briarwood Lane had stood empty for 11 years after the last family vanished. I should have questioned why the bank sold it to me for cash with no background check. I should have wondered why the neighbors crossed the street rather than walk past the property. I definitely should have asked why the basement door had 5 deadbolts, all installed from the inside. But after the divorce left me bankrupt and desperate, the absurdly low price tag outweighed all common sense. The first night, I heard something breathing through the vents, not the steady rhythm of the furnace. Something wetter, more deliberate, like it was tasting the air, sampling my scent as I moved from room to room. I told myself it was just the house settling, old pipes groaning, floorboards contracting in the autumn chill. By the third night, the scratching began. Not the light skittering of mice in the walls. This was something heavier, something that moved with purpose. I'd lie awake listening to it travel through the house, up the stairs, down the hallway, pausing outside my bedroom door like a guest working up the courage to knock. The sound reminded me of a dog's claws on hardwood, except ... sharper. More numerous. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator, just snippets of conversation that cut off the moment I focused on them. But as the weeks passed, they grew louder, more distinct. You shouldn't have bought this house, a woman's voice murmured from the heating vent one night. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice that answered wasn't human. It was wet and clicking, like someone speaking around a mouthful of broken teeth. Too late now. The basement door was locked when I moved in. Not just locked, sealed. 3 deadbolts and a heavy chain, all installed from the outside. The key the realtor gave me didn't fit any of them. It's just an old root cellar, she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing down there but dust and spiderweb. I believed her until the night I heard something knocking from the other side. Not random banging, a pattern. 3 slow knocks, 2 fast, then silence, waiting. The previous owners had left in a hurry. I found their belongings still packed in boxes. In the attic, photo albums, winter coats, a child's stuffed bear with 1 button eye missing. Beneath it all was a leather-bound journal. The last entry was dated the day they moved out. The house is hungry again. It started taking pieces of us while we sleep. Sarah woke up missing a finger. I found it in the flower jar. The house puts them back wrong. The fingers it gave her aren't hers. They're someone else's. The page ended there. On the back cover, scrawled in what looked like charcoal, "Don't open the basement. Don't feed it. Don't let it learn your name." Last night, the scratching stopped. The house was eerily silent for the first time since I moved in. I almost relaxed. Then the basement door creaked open on its own. The smell hit me first, damp earth and rotting meat. Then came the sound, breathing, wet, labored breathing from the darkness below, and something else. The click, click, click of too many joints moving at once. I'm writing this from my car. The house looms in the rearview mirror. Every window dark except one. The basement light is on, and something is standing in it, waving with my face. The highway stretched before me like a black tongue licking at the horizon. I'd been driving Route 17 for 6 hours when I first noticed the signs were wrong. Not damaged, not missing, changed. Blackwater, 12 miles became turn back, 12 seconds. When I blinked, the green exit marker for gas, food, lodging now, red hunger, pain, rest in peeling letters. I told myself it was fatigue. The divorce papers in my glove compartment, the half-empty bottle of bourbon rolling under the passenger seat. Then I saw the girl. She stood beneath the crumbling overpass, her yellow sundress soaked through and clinging to skeletal limbs. The storm hadn't reached this stretch yet, but her hair dripped steadily, forming dark puddles around bare feet that sank too deep into the asphalt. I pulled over, because that's what you do. Because my mother raised me right. Because the alternative was admitting something was terribly wrong. She wasn't there when I stepped out. Just the puddle. Too wide. Too dark. Reflecting stars that didn't exist in the storm. Choked sky above. The CB radio crackled to life inside my truck. "Help me, Mr. Not," through the speakers. From the puddle, the surface bulged upward like a water balloon, filling to bursting. Pale fingers breached the membrane, not reaching up, but pushing down, as if something was climbing out from underneath the water. I ran. That was 3 hours ago. Now my headlights flicker like a dying man's pulse. The fuel gauge hasn't moved since mile marker 77, and the reflection in my rear view mirror, it keeps smiling after I do. The exit signs count down to a town that isn't on any map. 10 miles, 5 miles, 2 miles. The CB crackles constantly now. That child's voice growing louder, more insistent. "Almost home, Mr." I press the accelerator harder. The engine screams. The tires shriek. And beneath it all, I hear a new sound. The wet, slapping footsteps of something keeping pace just beyond the shoulder. Waiting, hungry, smiling. The first footprint stopped me dead in my tracks. I crouched beside the impression in the damp Oregon soil, my fingers hovering just above its edges, 12 inches long, 5 distinct toes, pressed deep enough into the hard-packed earth that I could see the creases of a thick, leathery sole. My size 10 boot looked like a child's footprint beside it. "Bear?" Old Man Patterson asked, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. I shook my head, running my fingers along the strange mid-foot ridge no bear possesses. Nothing native makes tracks like this. 3 days later, Emily Patterson vanished. The search party found her pink sneaker near Rock Creek, the laces tied in an intricate knot no 8-year-old could manage. The dogs led us halfway up the ridge before whining and backing away, their tails tucked between their legs. That's when I noticed the branches broken 8 feet up the pines. Something massive had moved through here, traveling through the trees rather than around them. I set up my trail cameras that night, positioning them along game trails and near the creek bed. What they captured would haunt me forever. At 3:17 a.m., a hulking figure emerged from the tree, line 8 feet tall. If it was an inch, its shoulders rolling with each deliberate step. It paused at camera 3, nostrils flaring as it caught some scent on the wind. Moonlight glinted off intelligent, amber eyes, as it turned toward the lens. The timestamp said 3:17. My watch, when I checked the footage, read 12:03. The next morning, I found my warning. A young buck suspended upside down from a pine branch, its entrails arranged in perfect spirals beneath. At the center of this grotesque display lay my missing field notebook, the pages stuck together with something dark and viscous. Now, as I write this final entry, the forest has gone eerily silent. No owls, no wind, just the occasional crack of branches too high up for any normal animal. My compass spins wildly no matter which direction I face. The smell of wet fur and rotting meat clings to my clothes no matter how far I hike. I came here to study wildlife. Instead, something has been studying me, and tonight, as my campfire burned suspiciously low, despite fresh wood, I realized the awful truth. All those missing hikers, the slaughtered livestock, poor Emily Patterson. They weren't random victims, they were practice. I do not know how to explain this without sounding unstable. But maybe that is what this thing does. It robs you of your credibility, so no one believes what you saw. I am not writing this for attention. I am writing it because silence never helped anyone, and if someone else finds themselves in the narrows of Hunter's Gorge, maybe my words will be the warning they never got. My name is Jacob Collins. I am 42 years old. A high school science teacher from Missoula, Montana. 3 years ago, I took my son Mark on a weekend hike through the Bitterroot Range. He was 13 then, lanky and quiet, just beginning to crawl into that awkward stage, where everything about his dad embarrassed him. I remember thinking that this trip might be our last real bonding opportunity, before teenage cynicism swallowed him whole. The plan was to hike into Hunter's Gorge, an isolated slice of wilderness, deep within the bitter roots that few ever visit. Most hikers stick to the more accessible trails, but I had read about Hunter's Gorge in an old forestry journal, a natural corridor bordered by steep walls of pine and shadow. It was supposed to be beautiful, untouched, a place to get lost. Metaphorically, we had no idea how literal that would become. We arrived late in the morning and parked near the old ranger's station, which had long since been abandoned. The paint was peeled, the windows boarded, and a rusted sign out front read, "Enter at your own risk. No cell signal beyond this point." I took a picture of it with my phone. It felt like a fun, spooky memento at the time. The trail into the gorge was narrow and cluttered with overgrowth. Branches clawed at our backpacks, and the air grew cooler with every step downward. I remember thinking how quiet it was. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our boots against damp earth. Mark noticed it too. "Why is it so dead?" "High elevation," I told him. "Late in the season. Could be anything." That was the first lie I told him. The truth is, I did not know. And I felt it, that subtle pressure in the chest that you get before a storm hits, or when someone is watching you from behind a curtain. We made camp near a creek by dusk. Our tent was old but solid. We boiled water from the creek, made some powdered chili, and sat by a tiny fire until the sky turned purple. That's when we heard it. A crack, then a low, heavy thump. like something massive shifting its weight deep in the trees. Probably a moose. I said. Moose, don't walk like that, Mark whispered. He was right. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to a sound. Not loud, but sharp. Like a whistle, but wrong. Too long, too deliberate. And it echoed. Not across the gorge, but within it, bouncing off stone and pine in a way that made it feel, close. Mark was already sitting up, his eyes wide. You heard it too? He asked. I nodded, holding my breath. Then we heard it again, this time from a different direction. WHHOOOOO. P. Not human, not animal, just wrong. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and stepped outside with my flashlight. Nothing, just black. Trees and fog. No wind, no rustling. Even the crickets were gone. And then I saw them, prints. Massive, barefoot impressions in the dirt, just 10 feet from our campsite. Each one nearly twice the size of my own boot, pressed deep into the earth, like whatever made them weighed hundreds of pounds. I didn't sleep again that night. We packed up early. Mark did not argue. He had not spoken much since sunrise. I told him we were taking a different trail out, one that looped around the gorge instead of cutting through the heart of it. That was another lie. I did not want to admit we were lost. The GPS on my phone showed nothing. No signal. The battery drained faster than it should have. By noon, we had found a faint deer path that climbed along the ridge. I figured if we got high enough, we might see the road or the ranger's station. But every time we thought we were climbing out, the path would curve back downward, like the gorge did not want us to leave. We stopped to rest on a flat patch of rock. That's when we saw it. Across the gorge, maybe 200 yards away, standing perfectly still between two trees, a silhouette, 8 to 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, long arms hanging nearly to its knees. Its face was partially obscured by branches, but I swear to you, its eyes caught the light like metal, reflective, too intelligent. It didn't move, neither did. Mark started to cry silently. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. After a minute that felt like an hour, the figure took a step back and vanished into the brush. No sound, just gone. We camped again, not by choice. Mark had twisted his ankle, trying to scramble up a slope, and we couldn't keep moving in the dark. I barely managed to get the fire going with damp kindling. Mark curled up in his sleeping bag and stared at nothing. He hadn't spoken in hours. Around 2 a.m., the tree fell. It didn't crash. It didn't groan. It just dropped. Like something enormous had pushed it over. 20 yards from our tent, I grabbed my knife. Pointless, I knew, but it was all I had. From the dark came the whistle again. Longer this time, mocking then heavy. Footfalls, pacing around our camp. Never getting too close, but never leaving either. Just letting us know it was there. I didn't sleep. Mark didn't either. By morning, Mark had developed a fever. His ankle was swollen and purple. I tried to carry him, but the terrain was too steep, and I was already exhausted. That's when we saw the new trail, a freshly broken line through the trees, like something enormous had just passed through. Not a game trail, no. This one was intentional, wide enough for something bipedal, something massive. I told myself it might lead to a road. It was a stupid, desperate hope. We followed it, for hours. Then it ended. Not at a clearing, not at a river, at a pile. Bones, dozens of them. Deer, elk, bear, some stripped clean, others shattered. Among them, torn fabric, a shredded backpack. I turned around to tell Mark we needed to leave, but he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I screamed for him until my throat bled. I ran in every direction. I don't know how many hours passed. Finally, I collapsed, near the creek, and sobbed like a child. Then I heard it, not the whistle. A voice, Mark's voice. Dad, But it was wrong, off, like someone imitating him. Like a recording played at the wrong speed, it came from every direction, echoing through the gorge. At dawn, I found the ranger's station again. I do not remember how. I only remember falling through the door and calling for help on the emergency radio, which, miraculously, still worked. The rescue team found no sign of Mark, no footprints, no backpack, just me, delirious, dehydrated, talking about monsters. In the woods, they said. He probably wandered off, got lost, maybe fell into a ravine. I know better. Whatever lives in that gorge doesn't kill for food. It takes people for some other reason. Something worse. Mark's face still haunts my dreams. But it's never really him, just a pale imitation. Like that voice in the trees. I returned to Hunter's Gorge once, a year after the incident. I stood at the entrance and listened. Nothing, not even a whisper. But I know it's still there, watching and waiting. My name is Teresa Langdon, and I used to work as a wildlife biologist in northern Washington. I loved the isolation, the rhythm of nature, the way the land seemed to breathe when you were alone in it long enough. But that was before I took a short-term research assignment at Hollow Bend Preserve. That place changed everything. I don't mean that in a poetic sense. I mean it in the kind of way where your hands still shake when you think about the trees, where you avoid certain sounds, where your family wonders if you're still not over it, but you can't even begin to explain what it is without sounding broken. This is not a campfire story. This happened, and I haven't set foot in the woods since. Hollow Bend is a remote forested area near the Olympic Peninsula. The government owns it, but for decades it had been ignored, marked as protected but rarely monitored. My team got the assignment after reports of disappearing wildlife began surfacing in the surrounding areas. Entire groups of deer and small predators were vanishing without explanation. No blood, no carcasses. Just ... gone. It was late spring when we arrived. Myself and two graduate assistants, Nolan and Aisha, both were sharp, eager, and believed in science above all else. I liked that about them. We were there for a week, setting camera traps, tracking migration patterns, and cataloging evidence. The first 3 days were uneventful. Beautiful, even. But on the 4th day, we heard the screaming. The sun had just dipped below the trees when we first heard it. Not a human scream, not an animal either. Something else. A high-pitched bone, deep wail that didn't belong in any textbook. Aisha froze mid-conversation and whispered, "What the hell is that?" Nolan muttered, "That wasn't an owl." It started again, this time longer and closer. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a fox with an injury. Maybe wind bending trees in a weird way. But the truth was, I had never heard anything like it. We sat around the fire, pretending not to be afraid. But something about that sound stuck to the back of my mind like static. It kept playing long after it stopped. The next morning, we found the tracks. They were near the river where we had set up a series of cameras. At first, I thought it was a bear, but the spacing was wrong, the stride too long, and there were no claws. Just enormous, deep impressions in the mud. 5 toes, humanoid shape. Each print nearly 16 inches long. Nolan was the first to say it out loud. Bigfoot. I laughed, more out of fear than disbelief. There's no such thing, I said, even though my gut disagreed. That afternoon, Aisha reviewed the camera footage. I'll never forget the look on her face when she called us over. She had paused the video at frame 116. There, just behind a stand of trees, was a figure, towering, hair-covered. One arm wrapped around a tree trunk, the other hanging at its side. The face was mostly hidden, but the eyes caught the light in a way that made me feel sick. Nolan leaned in. "That's a man in a suit." But his voice cracked, and none of us believed it. That night, Aisha went missing. I woke to Nolan screaming her name outside the tent. I jumped up and ran out, heart racing. Her sleeping bag was empty, her boots gone, no sign of struggle, just a trail of barefoot prints leading into the woods. Huge ones, not hers. I wanted to believe she went for a walk, that she heard something and followed it. But who goes barefoot into the wilderness after midnight? We radioed for help. Nothing, no signal by dawn. We knew we were on our own. That evening, the screams returned, but this time, they sounded like Aisha. "Help, please, help me." It echoed from every direction. Nolan bolted toward the sound, crashing through the underbrush. I followed, yelling for him to stop, but he wouldn't. The forest twisted in a way that made no sense. The trees all started to look the same. The ground felt softer, spongy even. I swear I saw shadows moving just beyond the edge of my flashlight. Not animal shadows, not human either. And then it stopped. All sound, just silence. I found Nolan's flashlight 10 minutes later, still on. No sign of him, just more prints and a smell, like rot and pine and something that didn't belong in this world. I don't remember getting back to camp. Some part of me went on autopilot. I sat by the cold fire pit until sunrise, rocking back and forth, clutching a pocket knife like it meant anything. At some point, I heard heavy footfalls around the tent, slow, deliberate, circling. I didn't move, I barely breathed. Then something pushed against the tent wall, just gently. Fingertips. I saw them press into the nylon fabric, and then a face, flattened slightly against the tent wall, inches from mine, covered in hair. Lips pulled back to reveal enormous, human-like teeth. The eye, I only saw one, was almost human. It blinked, and then it was gone. Was found 2 days later by a search team. I don't remember seeing them. I was dehydrated, sunburnt, babbling nonsense about the trees having eyes. They never found Aisha or Nolan. The footage from the cameras was all corrupted, not deleted, not missing, just static, like something burned through it. The incident was officially labeled a wildlife-related disappearance. I quit the profession 2 weeks later. I live in Spokane now. I do not camp. I do not hike. I do not even walk through heavily wooded parks. Sometimes, late at night, I hear screams again. Not in the air, but in my dreams. Sometimes it's Aisha. Sometimes it's Nolan. Sometimes ... It's me. The first time I saw the footprints in the mud near Willow Creek, I thought someone was playing an elaborate hoax. As a national park ranger for over 15 years, I'd seen my share of pranks, tourists faking bear tracks, kids making plaster casts of fake monster prints. But these ... these were different. Each footprint measured 18 inches long, pressed nearly 2 inches deep into soil that had been bone dry until last night's storm. The stride length was what really got me, 5.5 feet between impressions. Whatever made these tracks stood at least 9 feet tall and weighed well over 800 pounds based on the depth. "Bear?" asked my new trainee Mark, kneeling beside the trail. I shook my head, running my fingers along the distinct mid-tarsal ridge. No claw marks, no heel drag. And look here, I pointed to the dermal ridges. That's not a paw, that's a foot. The disappearance of the Henderson family the following week changed everything. We found their campsite completely intact, tent still standing, sleeping bags unrolled, a pot of cold stew on the camp stove. Only their boots remained, lined up, neatly outside the tent, like they'd all stepped out, barefoot in the middle of the night. The tracks told the story. 18-inch prints circling the tent. Then 4 sets of smaller human footprints emerging. Then, nothing. Just the giant prints leading away into the woods. The stride length increasing, as if whatever made them was suddenly carrying heavy weight. That night, something visited the ranger station. I was reviewing the case files when the motion lights flicked on outside. Through the window, I saw the security camera slowly tilt upward, as if something tall had walked up and adjusted it. When I went outside with my flashlight, I found fresh prints in the flower bed beneath the camera. 18 inches, 5 toes. Still damp. The game cameras we set up captured even more disturbing evidence. 3:17 a.m. A massive hairy figure standing at the tree line, sniffing the wind. 3:29 a.m. The same creature crouched near the station's dumpster, sorting through trash, with disturbingly human-like fingers. 3:33 a.m. The worst shot, a close-up of its face pressed against the lens, nostrils flaring, as it examined the camera with clear, intelligent curiosity. The timestamp said 3:33. My watch read 3:17. When we searched the area where the Hendersons vanished, we found a strange structure, a crude shelter made of interwoven pine boughs, far too large to be human, made. Inside, arranged neatly on a flat rock, were 4 sets of human teeth, not scattered, not gnawed, placed like a collection. Now, as I write this final report, the forest has gone completely silent. No insects, no birds, just the occasional crack of branches too high up for any normal animal. My coffee goes cold the moment I pour it, no matter how fresh the brew. My compass spins wildly, no matter which direction I face. And tonight, as I sit alone in the station, I realize the awful truth. All those missing hikers over the years, the strange lights in the woods, the unexplained recordings on our equipment, they weren't accidents. They weren't random. They were gifts. And whatever lives in these mountains is finally ready to collect. My name is Daniel Carver. I spent most of my adult life fighting wildfires across the Pacific Northwest. I have hiked through burning forests, slept on smoldering ground, and watched fire roll down mountainsides like a living thing. But the most terrifying moment of my life didn't involve smoke or flame. It happened one summer in a place called Ridgewater Basin, a stretch of untamed land known for its steep canyons, dense tree cover, and complete isolation. It was the summer of 2019. We had been dispatched to Ridgewater to create a firebreak in anticipation of a lightning storm. My team consisted of 6 men, all seasoned, all good under pressure. Our job was to clear vegetation, dig trenches, and establish a buffer line that would hopefully slow down any flames that came roaring through the canyon. We had 3 days to set it up before the forecasted storm hit. On the first day, everything was fine. The forest was calm, quiet, in the way deep wilderness tends to be, where even the wind seems reluctant to disturb the silence. That evening, after 10 hours of hard labor, we camped at the edge of the basin. There were no roads in or out, just helicopters and boots. We were the only people for miles, at least, that's what we thought. I remember that first night clearly. We sat around a small campfire, swapping stories and eating dehydrated meals. When James, the youngest on the crew, spoke up, "You guys ever feel like you're being watched out here?" he asked, stirring his food. Everyone laughed it off, but I could tell a few of them understood what he meant. There's something about wilderness that presses against your instincts. The knowledge that out there, you're no longer at the top of the food chain. You can go missing and never be found. We slept uneasily. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of crunching footsteps. Not animal, like scurrying, heavy, 2-footed. I unzipped my tent slowly, just enough to peek through. I saw nothing. Just the dim glow of the dying fire and the silhouettes of trees. But I could still hear it, moving just out of sight. Not rushing, not hunting. Just pacing. I reached for the hatchet I kept under my sleeping bag and waited, barely breathing. The footsteps circled twice and then faded. I told myself it was just another team member stretching his legs, but no one else admitted to leaving their tent that night. The next day, the forest felt heavier. That's the only way I can describe it. Heavier. The birds weren't singing. The squirrels weren't chirping. There was a blanket of stillness. That made everything feel unnatural. We worked faster than usual, the silence acting like a weight on our backs. Around midday, Gary, one of our sawyers, found something strange near the ridge line. It was a pile of rocks stacked waist high, balanced, not fallen, deliberate. On top of the stack was what looked like a bird carcass, skinned and splayed. The head had been twisted backward. Gary thought it was some kind of backwoods art, a joke, maybe from campers or hunters. But there hadn't been anyone else in Ridgewater for weeks. The rangers kept strict records. I had seen them myself. Later that afternoon, we found more of them, rock stacks, all shaped slightly differently, all topped with pieces of animal remains, bones, feathers, stripped hides. They weren't clumped together either. They were placed in a wide circle that covered at least half a mile, and we were camped right in the center of it. I'll admit it. I wanted to leave. I wasn't the only one. That night, we sat around the fire in uneasy silence. Nobody ate much. Every crack of a branch made us flinch. James tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but his voice kept breaking. Then came the howl. It started low and deep, like a cello string being drawn out too long. It rose in pitch until it sounded like metal being torn in half. Then it stopped. No echoes, no repeats. Just that one long scream that didn't sound like anything I'd ever heard in the wild. And I've heard bears, wolves, cougars, you name it. This wasn't that. Everyone stood up. Flashlights scanned the tree line, but we saw nothing. No one slept. We took shifts by the fire, weapons in hand. Around 4 a.m., we heard something massive crashing through the brush, just beyond the fire's edge. I saw a shadow, huge. It moved between the trees, like it belonged there, like it had always been there. Gary aimed his light at it, and for a split second, I saw it. It was at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark matted hair. Its arms hung below. Its knees. The eyes reflected the flashlight, but not like an animal. Not like prey. Like something thinking. Calculating. It didn't run. It just stood there, watching us. Then it slowly turned and vanished into the dark. The next morning, we were divided. 3 of the guys wanted to call for an evac. The others insisted we stay and finish the job. But that debate ended when we found the body. It was Marcus. He had gone to relieve himself sometime before dawn and never came back. We found him less than 100 yards from camp. His head had been twisted backward, not by an animal. There were no bite marks, no tears, just unnatural damage. And beside his body was another rock stack, only this one had something else on. His helmet perfectly balanced. We radioed for emergency evac, but we were too deep. It would take a day for the chopper to get clearance and another to reach us. We had no choice but to stay one more night. We built the fire larger that evening. No one spoke. No one slept. Around midnight, the howling started again. Not one this time, multiple like there were several of them. Deep voices echoing in the hills, surrounding us. Then came the tree knocks. Loud sharp cracks like wood slamming against wood. They were communicating. At least, that's what it felt like. And then we heard footsteps again, all around. At one point, I turned and saw something move just beyond the tree line. 2 red eyes blinking in unison. We threw logs on the fire, trying to keep the light strong, the shadows at bay. And that's when the rocks started. Small ones at first, tossed from the dark, then larger. One struck Gary in the arm, hard enough to bruise him through his jacket. We screamed into the forest, swore, cried. I even begged. Nothing stopped them. They never entered the light. They just kept circling, mocking, watching by sunrise. They were gone. So was James. There was no blood. Just drag marks leading into the forest, and a broken tree limb, where something massive had moved through. When the chopper finally arrived that afternoon, we left everything. Tents, tools, gear. None of it mattered. The official report blamed dehydration and stress, said Marcus had slipped, said James wandered off. None of us believed that, and they knew we didn't. But they also made it clear, whatever we thought, we saw, it was better left unspoken. I quit the fire crew after that season, moved inland, took a job in an office, something with walls and locks and no trees for miles. Sometimes I dream of the fire line again, but it's not the flames that wake me up. It's the sound of breathing, low, slow, and just outside the light, waiting, watching, listening. My name is Lena Morrison, and I am not the kind of person who believes in cryptids. I have always been a rational thinker, a biology teacher, with a deep love for science and logic. My husband, Derek, used to joke that I could explain away a poltergeist with weather patterns and sleep paralysis. But there are some things I cannot explain, things that follow you in silence, things that watch and wait, not out of hunger, but out of something darker, something primal. What happened to me beneath Deadwood Bridge is one of those things. It started when Derek and I decided to take a long weekend off-grid. We had both been burned out. Me from teaching during the spring term, him from working endless overtime at the clinic. We needed space. No phones, no Wi-Fi, just us and the forest. Deadwood Bridge was an old, forgotten trail tucked inside the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. It had once been part of a logging route in the early 1900s. Now, it was a ghost trail, unmarked, unmapped, and surrounded by dense pine forests and ravines. Derek found the spot through a backpacking forum. One guy mentioned the location in a vague comment, calling it quiet and untouched. That was enough to pique Derek's interest. We packed up our gear, loaded the truck, and headed out on a Thursday morning. It took us 7 hours to get there. The road turned from pavement to gravel, then gravel to dirt, and finally into 2 ruts, barely wide enough for our tires. By late afternoon, we reached a clearing. There was a trailhead marker, so old and faded, it was practically invisible. Just behind it was a footpath, nearly swallowed by undergrowth. The bridge itself lay 2 miles in. We hiked with our packs, passing through untouched forest. Not a single beer can, not a cigarette butt. It was beautiful, silent in the way wild land can be, but still. I did notice one thing though. There were no animals, no squirrels, no deer. Not even birds. Just trees. Miles of trees, and the wind didn't even rustle them. When we reached the bridge, I stopped. It was a narrow wooden structure that spanned a deep, dry creek bed. The boards were sun-bleached, many cracked, but still walkable. Moss grew on the ropes that made up the handrails. Beneath it, the gully was a tangle of rock and earth. A perfect place for water to rush during the melt, but now bone dry. We set up camp a few hundred feet past the bridge, near a mossy flat patch where the tree canopy opened up just enough to let in some golden light. It was the most isolated place I'd ever been. Not even planes passed overhead. That first night was uneventful. We had a fire, ate freeze, dried pasta, and told stories. The usual. I went to bed early, while Derek stayed up watching the stars. Some point in the night, I woke up. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. I sat up in my sleeping bag, listening. That's when I heard it. A low, heavy grunt. Somewhere out in the dark. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Deep, resonant, like a chest exhaling after a long breath. I thought it might be a bear. So I nudged Derek awake. He grumbled, but sat up. I told him what I heard. He listened. Another grunt, then something heavier. A thump, then another. It was walking, but not like a bear. Not loping or four-footed. This was 2 steps. Pause. 2 steps. Like a person. Derek unzipped the tent and peeked out. His body went rigid. I whispered, "What do you see?" He didn't answer. He just reached for his flashlight and clicked it. On nothing, just trees. The sound had stopped. We waited another 10 minutes before zipping the tent back up. Derek didn't fall back asleep. Neither did I. The next morning we checked around camp. No footprints, no snapped branches. Everything looked normal, except for one odd thing. A piece of meat from our cooler was missing, still sealed. No rips, no tear marks, just gone. Derek thought we'd miscounted. I knew better. We tried to shrug. It often continued the day with a hike down the dry creek bed. It was beautiful but barren. At one point I noticed what looked like claw marks high up on a boulder. Too high for a bear, maybe a cougar. But even that seemed to stretch. As we came back to camp around sunset, Derek stopped walking. He pointed to the trail just before the bridge. There were footprints, huge, barefoot, human-shaped prints in the dirt, at least 17 inches long, 5 toes. No claw marks, just ... feet. They were headed toward our camp. We looked at each other, trying to rationalize. Prank. Hiker, with a messed up sense of humor. But we hadn't seen or heard a single person since we got there. The prints circled the fire pit, paused by our tent, and walked back toward the bridge. We followed them. They led onto the bridge, right down the center, and stopped halfway across. Not on the other side. Not back toward the woods, just ... ended, as if whatever had made them vanished into thin air. That night, we didn't sleep in the tent. We built up the fire and took shifts. One of us awake at all times. Around 2 a.m.,